Corn and soybeans beaten down by the USDA report. Jerry Gidel is ready to weigh in right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, how are you today? Let's jump right into the USDA report. What have you seen that has surprised you?
Well, the USDA's report of last week definitely uh, kind of slowed things down here. We had a kind of a bounce, a price bounce going into it, but uh, the soybean market really took a kind of a beating there on Monday because of the fact that we did have some rains that did hit in Argentina. Interestingly enough, that rain was really concentrated in the northern parts of Cordoba, Santa Fe, and then some of the northern parts of Argentina, which they were been dry too. There's no doubt about it, but it's not the major producing areas. There was some rains in southeast Cordoba that was a positive. There's no doubt about that. But interestingly enough, since then, we were also getting last week a very unusual pattern going on here where the meal market was on fire. The meal market or soybean oil was getting kind of beat up because it's the U.S. The EPA hadn't really planned for a big expansion, so maybe it's not coming. This kind of stuff, and then the USDA didn't make any adjustments in their crush because of the expectations of the ideas in their supply demands, and so all of a sudden we had a huge correction in the long oil short meal. Yeah, heck, we had a $75 rally in 8 days in January soybean meal. So that was pretty significant. But since then, we've kind of stabilized back out, and people are starting to kind of pay attention here again from that standpoint. That interestingly enough, the West, overall the general demand for U.S. proteins are still pretty strong, and that the one twist that actually was later in the week, it really wasn't something involving with the USDA report from last week and soybeans, was that the uh, November soybean crush turned out to be less than expected. It's always interesting in the fact that sometimes it's people in the trades don't seem to forget sometimes that there's differences between months and how many days of processing there's going on. This month was another one of those ones that snuck up on people. Of course, we had 31 days in October. We only had 30 days in November. And that one less day made it tough even if you stayed at the same processing rate during the month of November, you probably weren't going to get the same total number of crush, because we actually had the number come down from 184 down to 180, or excuse me, actually 179.5. And that actually the low numbers out there was 180 to 184 on the trade expectations from there. And that kind of beat things up a little bit yesterday, but bang, zoom, here we're back up here on Friday with the idea that the world still need some protein here and that type of thing. I My number in expectations for yesterday was 180.1, so I wasn't as low as the USDA, but I was on the right side of the average of expectations from there. But that's the interesting thing. Soybeans have been getting a lot more publicity here recently, because the one thing is interesting about this. After all this concerns about the fact that the renewable diesel scenario, ideas from the government and the energy EIA Department of Energy hadn't really paying attention to what might be going on. There was some statements out from a fella from a Minnesota co-op talking about the fact that we might still need 9 million acres of beans by 4 or 5 years from now to meet the demand. This is all based upon California's and potentially Washington and Oregon joining that idea that the amount of various pollutants in regular diesel fuel, which is, of course, kind of the low end of the processing of a crude oil, and that's what they use for years as a thing for trucks and things like that. Now they're with soybean oil and renewable diesel. You don't have those kind of nitrous oxide, I think, is the thing that's got people's contention here, because it potentially is creating smog in that. And the West Coast have had issues with that for years. So, but that's a big factor here in the soybeans this week, bouncing back and forth on these things. And so I think that that's going to probably continue here as we go into 2023 here on the soybeans. Corn and wheat, though, they were just pretty quiet this week.
Yes, and still on the soybean context, now we are going to watch South America for the development of the crop, and I don't think we are going to have those stunning crops this year.
Well, that's the thing. There's two different attitudes going on down there. People are looking at Argentina, and they're definitely getting some issues there. Rosario's exchange this week reduced actually their wheat estimate again, down to 11.4. Now I think it was like 12 before. That's not a big change, but the biggest thing is we've seen it come down from 22 last year. So we're talking about half a crop for there. And at this point, the soybean side of things in going forward here, the dryness is definitely slowed down their plantings down there. And that I think the number this week on soybeans actually finally got to just right around 60%, up from 42 last week, and in Argentina, but that's normally about 80% at this point or more. And there was, as I mentioned, some showers around, some light stuff in other areas earlier in the week, but right now there's still not a lot of projections on that. But on the other side of the border there, in Brazil, there's been some rains across the Mato Grosso, Goiás, up in Bahia, and then some scattered stuff around, even in Paraná and Mato Grosso do Sul. But Rio Grande do Sul definitely had some reductions here from one of the more prominent U.S. brokerage firms called StoneX has a big operation down in Brazil, and so they ended up deciding that they needed to adjust down their corn production by about 800 to 900,000 metric tons. There were about I think it was 5.4, and now it's excuse me, it's 4.5 right now, and so it was 5.3, I guess, previously, and that's not as low as last year. The number from last year was 2.56, so we're not as bad off as last year's impact on corn down there in Rio Grande do Sul. But Rio Grande is an area where there's a lot of livestock left, and it's kind of important to get some corn for those animals, and at the same time, it's not a place where you have corn being planted twice, or the double crop corn that's done in Brazil is really in the northern areas after soybeans, and it's not something that comes back with a big vengeance of secondary corn plantings in that state, in Rio Grande do Sul. So, it's been quite interesting. The biggest thing right now is that everybody, there still seems to be a general theory out here that we're going to end up seeing La Nina fade very quickly after the first of the year, and things are going to be very positive. But I guess the biggest thing is how quickly do we get this crop established, and how good a crop gets established. Sometimes you put seeds in the ground and it's pretty dry; they don't all come up. And so I think that's one of the other features that we still got to worry about. But right now, this time of year, we always have a lot of complacency, a lot of traders and funds and things like that, particularly as we start going into the Christmas holiday week and between Christmas and New Year's, things can be pretty quiet, and they kind of pull back their positions and kind of wait until the new year.
Now, wheat has gone down at the end of the week. And last week we talked about the future prices of wheat, and I think it's going to be really hard to predict because we are seeing that the war is still having some consequences, and we cannot predict what's going to happen with that offensive of Ukraine into Russia right now.
I'll totally agree. If anybody could figure out what's going on in the mind of Mr. Putin, well, we'd all be better off. But there's no way of figuring that out. He's got his own little strange world he deals with there. Concerning and then the interesting twist about it is that since we've had the extension here since about to say November 20th, and that first we had the reduced number of ships that were there to be filled up because of the fact that people were very cautious that it's going to get extended. And then since then, the Russians' approach here to their warfare out in Ukraine is to send in long missiles and bombing ideas of electrical things, and so that's really slowed down some of the ability to actually get some grain out of these ports. And that they had one particular one early last week. I think it might have been over the last weekend, and that had them out for 36 hours or more. And then the other subtle thing that's going on right now is that the Russian inspection team that's down in Turkey, that's just as they leave the Black Sea and go into the Mediterranean, and that somehow or other they just have a hard time getting more than 3 or 4 ships looked at on a daily basis. They're just overworked down there, and so that's another subtle feature in here is the Russians saying one thing and doing things, but they're still not they're not encouraging any big expansion of stuff out of Ukraine, which in its own way is going to be somewhat supportive to other areas of the world, because there's not a lot of extra stuff floating around out here. Particularly, we just talked about Argentina having a little smaller crop now. There was an update, I think it might have actually been before last weekend, that Australia's crop was going to be higher, but it's going to be a feed quality scenario. It's not going to be wheat itself. It's the quality of that wheat got beat up because of too much rain, which is going to be a competitor of corn going into those Southeast and Asian markets out there, and that the Chinese know how to feed wheat out there if they need to. So that's a subtlety for corn. But I'd have to say that wheat in general here, I think the interesting thing that could occur going forward here this coming week and 10 days, the U.S. Temperatures are really going to start to plunge here starting after Christmas, and they're talking about temperatures here in Chicago at 0 or below. Now that's not totally a biggie for soft red in this part of the world, but there's some projections we could be down, below 0 out there in the plains. from Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska going northward. And the one thing that surprisingly happens here for wheat is if it's snow on the ground, there's a little insulation between the cold and the wheat. But if there's no snow on the ground, then that could definitely ding up a few dormant wheat plants down in that part of the world. So I bet we're going to get that commentary pop up on us here as we get into the middle part of next week, going into Christmas and afterwards for sure.
Yes, I will see you after Santa comes in. Merry Christmas.
Exactly. With the US, with the Board of Trade not having trading hours on the 26th, because we have a Sunday Christmas this year, and the same thing for New Year's. And that I think is probably we can take a siesta week here, and then we'll be back on the 30th for another update at this point. But it's hope you have a great holiday time there, Luis, and we all need to count our blessings here this year because it's been a pretty strong price for U.S. grains at this point. We'll just have to see how things happen in 2023.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.